Hi, everybody. I am Rabbi Cara Weinstein Rosenthal, Associate Rabbi at Temple Beth Shalom. And I want to wish you a Chodesh Tov, a good Rosh Chodesh, a good beginning to the new Hebrew month of Elul, which starts today. Elul is a special time in the Jewish calendar because it's the month leading up to the high holidays, leading up to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And for that reason, Elul is traditionally seen as a time of reflection and contemplation, so that we can look inside ourselves and figure out what it is we need to do to repent and make a fresh start in the new year. So because of the special nature of this time of Elul, I wanted to have this little video series, of which this is the first installment, that I'm calling Finding Meaning in the Machzor. The Machzor is a special Hebrew term for the High Holiday Prayer Book that you've seen and used at TBS. We use the wonderful Machzor Lev Shalem put out by the conservative movement. And the Machzor is really an amazing resource, not only of the traditional prayers and their translations, but also of some newer poems and reflections and readings written by contemporary Jewish authors that the editors of the Machzor have added into this text, often on the margins next to the main text. So what I want to do in these videos, I'm going to have one video during each of the 4 weeks of the month of Elul, is share with you some of the readings from the Machzor that I find the most meaningful, because I think that you'll find them meaningful as well, and maybe they will help inspire all of us to make the most of this month of Elul and to do that difficult work of reflection and contemplation that we need to do to make sure that we're really going to have a good and fruitful and meaningful high holiday season. So today I want to share with you one of the readings that's found in the Machzor as part of the Rosh Hashanah service. This is really one of my favorite readings in the Machzor, and it reads a little bit differently than the traditional text at first look because it's not one of the traditional texts. It's a contemporary poem, and it has a different feel to it. Let me share it. This is a poem called The Thread by Denise Levertov. And I'll read through it and then talk about it for a minute or two. The thread. Something is very gently, invisibly, silently pulling at me. A thread or net of threads finer than cobweb and as elastic. I haven't tried the strength of it. No barbed hook pierced and tore me. Was it not long ago this thread began to draw me? Or way back? Was I born with its knot about my neck, a bridle? Not fear, but a stirring of wonder makes me catch my breath when I feel the tug of it, when I thought it had loosened itself and gone. One of the reasons I love this poem is that I think it speaks so eloquently about a part of the human condition that I recognize, and that you might recognize as well. This tendency we sometimes have to feel an urge, something pulling at us, and we can't quite figure out where it came from. The poet voices this very beautifully. She doesn't even know where this invisible thread that she feels pulling at her started or when it started. She says, was it not long ago this thread began to draw me? Or way back? Was I even born with it and didn't feel it up until now? And I think that this happens to many of us. And sometimes we don't feel these feelings, these urges, these pulls, these tendencies, until we're sort of able to have the time to kind of be silent and still with ourselves. And then we realize that we sort of feel a force pulling at us, and we're not sure exactly where it came from or where it wants us to go. So this is an interesting sort of study of part of the human condition, but why is it in the Machzor? Why did the editors of the Machzor Lev Shalem decide to put this in? Well, I think first of all, as we approach the high holidays, it's important to take an honest look at ourselves and all of the various forces that tug at us, all of the different urges and tendencies that we have. We, of course, want to make sure that we are listening to those pulls that we feel that are leading us toward the good rather than the bad. It's part of the human condition sometimes to have, things that pull us towards positive, constructive things, and also sometimes tendencies towards less positive and constructive things. So we want to listen to those that are pulling us in the right direction for the new year. I also like the fact that the poet says that what she feels when she feels this sort of metaphorical thread pulling at her is not fear, but wonder. She says, not fear, but a stirring of wonder makes me catch my breath when I feel the tug of it. And I think this term wonder is really meaningful, especially at this time of year. We humans are logical and scientific, especially today in the 21st century, but sometimes we do feel something tugging at us, a feeling like there's something else in the world, in the universe, besides what we can see with our eyes and feel with our fingertips. Maybe it's a pull towards God and the divine. Maybe it's an inkling of heaven that we get, even on this mortal earth. I think that we feel these things sometimes, and sometimes the scientific parts of us want to resist those feelings a little bit. And this poem is giving us license to really feel them and acknowledge them. This idea of sort of feeling like there's a greater force that's pulling at us is related to the idea of the philosopher and Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who had this concept of radical amazement, which is sort of like awe, but a little bit different. So what is awe? It's the feeling that there is something great in the world, something miraculous inherent in the world around us, an order and a beauty and a holiness in the world put there by God that we can't always discern except when we allow ourselves to, when we give ourselves the time and space to discern it and feel it and acknowledge it. And for Heschel, this concept of radical amazement, of realizing the beauty and the holiness and the divine mystery in the world, is also related to the concept of gratitude. When we allow ourselves to feel this awe, this radical amazement, then we have to be grateful for the world that God gave us and God's part in it. So I think as we approach the high holidays, as we're here immersed in the month of Elul, this reading reminds us to pay attention to those forces that pull at us, make sure we're listening to the ones that want to pull us in the right direction. And I think this poem also reminds us that when we feel those stirrings of whatever we want to call it, spirit, wonder, perhaps even religiosity, perhaps faith, when we feel those threads pulling at us, even when we are postmodern, scientific, logically minded humans, it's okay to give in to that pull a little bit and see where it takes us. So over the next week, before I put out the next video in the series, my suggestion to you, to all of us, is maybe that we take some time to contemplate the invisible threads that we feel pulling at us when we're honest with ourselves. So consider, do you ever feel an invisible thread pulling at you? And if so, where do you think it wants you to go in the new year? Wishing you a Chodesh Tov, a good beginning to the month of Elul. May it hold blessings and renewal for all of us.